Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Claire, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I am pleased to introduce this virtual event with Peter Swanson presenting his new novel, Vow You Break. He'll be in conversation with Paul Tremblay. Through virtual events like tonight's, Harvard Bookstore continues to bring authors and their work to our community and our new and expanded digital community during these challenging times. Thank you for joining us in support of our authors and the incredible staff of booksellers at Harvard Bookstore. We sincerely appreciate your support now and always. Every week, we're hosting events, and our schedule appears on our website at harvard.com/events, where you can also sign up for our email newsletter and even browse our shelves from home. After the introduction, I will drop a link in the chat to purchase a copy of Peter's new book. Your purchases and financial contributions, I'll also share a link to donate, make this virtual author series possible, and now more than ever, support the future of a landmark independent bookstore. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question at any time during the talk tonight, you can go to the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get through as many as time allows. And finally, as you may have experienced in virtual gatherings over these many months, technical issues may arise. If they do, we'll do our best to resolve them quickly, and so we thank you for your patience and understanding. Peter Swanson is the author of 7 novels, including the best-selling and critically acclaimed 8 Perfect Murders, The Kind Worth Killing, which won the New England Society Book Award and was a finalist for the CWA Ian Fleming Steel Dagger Award, and Her Every Fear, which was named an NPR Book of the Year. You may also be familiar with his stories, poetry, and other features, which have appeared in Asimov's science fiction, The Atlantic, The Guardian, and Yankee Magazine, among others. He'll be joined in conversation tonight by Paul Tremblay, author of Growing Things, The Cabin at the End of the World, Disappearance of Devil's Rock, and the crime novels The Little Sleep and No Sleep Till Wonderland. He's currently a member of the board of directors of the Shirley Jackson Awards, and his essays and short fiction have appeared in the LA Times, Entertainment Weekly, and numerous other best anthologies of the year, or year's best anthologies. We've all heard the saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but does that aphorism cover bachelorette parties generally? And what happens when the choices you made at said bachelorette start to haunt your honeymoon? In the thrilling Vow You Break, Peter Swanson has the reader on alert from page 1. The Wall Street Journal says, Peter Swanson specializes in writing mesmerizing thrillers that subvert readers' expectations. The author works in particular magic once again with Vow You Break. His shape-shifting saga is reminiscent by turns of such foreboding films as Vertigo, Fatal Attraction, and The Wicker Man. Ultimately, it reveals itself to be a violent melodrama, one which the author sees sure-handedly through to a satisfying conclusion. And for Booklist, Bill Ott writes, lots of thriller writers know how to set a hook, but Swanson isn't satisfied with just one. The further we go into his devilishly twisty tales, the more hooks he sets and the harder we tug on the line. And so now I am pleased to turn things over to tonight's speakers. The digital podium is yours, Peter and Paul.
Great, thank you so much, Claire. First and foremost, Peter, congratulations. Happy book birthday.
Thank you.
Where's your hat?
I know.
You don't have a happy birthday hat. I was going to open up by pointing out that the last live event I did, and I'm pretty sure it's the last live event that you did, I could be wrong, was just over a year ago, early March of 2020. You and I did an event at the Andover Library. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and then literally like, the next day it was like everything is shutting down.
I remember you. Someone came up to try and shake your hand, and we were kind of doing the elbow thing. At that point, I think we were kind of taking it seriously. It had left for a while there was that kind of a jokey stage where everyone's like, oh, let's talk about COVID, but we don't really think anything major is going to happen. And right around that point, it was like, oh no, this actually feels like it's coming to this country. And, you know, and for the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll all be inside.
Yeah, no.
Little did we know.
Yeah, no, I definitely felt like the nervous jokey stage, like, you know, we're going to need a bigger boat, like nervous joke stage. And so now we're doomed to replay this every year online. I'm just kidding.
That's right.
All right, so if I can read my writing, I have some questions for you about Vow You Break, which I will hold up. It's the ARC, it's not the nice hardcover, right?
I'll hold up the nice hardcover too. There it is. Make my
All
publicist.
right. So what, I'm going to start with I'm going to preface anything I ask you with, they're going to be like sometimes long, sometimes rambly, because I'm going to try to avoid spoiling things and let you be the one who throws out any nuggets of information that you choose to give out. Since we actually started about talking about 2020, like when did you write this book? I'm curious if you finished it right before the pandemic happened or after. Give me a little bit of a timeline when you worked on this novel.
This book was done last year when we had our event. This book was already done. I mean, that's just the schedule I'm on. I'm on a book a year schedule, so I always kind of turn in. If you're not familiar, there's a long lead time in book publishing for them to wrestle over the title and the marketing and all that sort of thing. So this book had been finished this time last year, pre-COVID, and the book itself is obviously a pre-COVID book where people gather at bachelorette parties and kiss strangers and talk to people in bars and things like that.
Yeah. Thankfully, I'm not in a place where that strikes me as weird or pulls me out of a story. And I hope I'm never at that point, no matter how long sort of like the new normal or whatever the new normal becomes lasts. So let me ask, what was sort of the kernel for this book? Like, so I know, I would assume like similar to me, like you're on a schedule, you have book deals. So it's like, oh, you've agreed to do these certain amount of books in a certain amount of time. So you don't necessarily have the luxury to wait around for inspiration. Sometimes you have to force it. So I'm curious, what was the start or the what if that became every Vow You Break?
Yeah, I think the odd thing about this, maybe it's the first time it's happened with me this way, was that my inspiration was for the kind of book I wanted to write as opposed to the actual book. I feel like my previous 6 thrillers have been fairly complex in the sense that they often have 2 or 3 different narrative perspectives. Like I've had books where there's 3 narrators and they're narrating at different times. And I've had books where, there's 2 timelines running along, like a past and a present, and the past is affecting the present. And I had this real urge, I've had this for a while, to write what I think of as an Ira Levin thriller. And an Ira Levin thriller to me, like Rosemary's Baby or Stepford Wives, is, we follow one person's perspective and just, weird stuff starts happening to them. And as they learn it, as it happens to them, it happens to you as the reader as well. There's no backstories. There's no, it just sort of barrels forward in a linear way into the resolution. So I was really interested in writing a book that fell along these lines for a couple reasons. I thought it'd be nice to write a shorter book, because I think books like this should be a little bit shorter if you don't have subplots and things like that. This book has some subplots, but it basically is subplot free. And I think a part of me was like, this might be a little easier book to write. Like I won't actually have to create a calendar like I usually do and say when things happen. And so, of course, I was completely wrong on the easier thing. I mean, all books are structure. And I probably finished this book and spent more time redrafting this book and going over issues with the structure. Even though the structure is ultimately simple, it didn't make the writing process simpler. That's what I learned. I think all books are hard in their own way. It's not like you're ever going to write something and be like, that was easy. I suspect you would probably agree with me on that. So in this
Absolutely.
case, I came up with this story. I'd always wanted to do an infidelity thing and a gender reversed one. So sort of a Fatal Attraction type story, but instead of the sort of powerful man being brought down by infidelity, have the woman, and she's actually marrying a powerful man, have her commit an infidelity that begins to haunt her, quite literally, because she's being followed by a one-night stand onto her honeymoon island, and then things sort of switch up and change from that original simpler idea. So when those 2 ideas came together, the first half and the second half, I knew that was the book that I wanted to write.
Excellent. I wonder if two of my questions, I'm not sure which one to go with based off
I
of that, because
answered
they
them
both
both
build off
already.
this.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that was good. And by the way, everyone watching at home, he and I are in the same room. It's just like,
Yeah, on either side.
Actually, depending on how you're looking, if I go this way.
It's weird. It's weird
Appear on that screen.
being over here.
Well, let me ask, let me jump to this one then. Since you mentioned sort of the gender switch on Fatal Attraction somewhat, we'll talk about movies in a little bit later too. But I wanted to, or I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the challenges of writing from Abigail's point of view, especially as she's sort of put through the ringer. And again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but there's certainly, there's contemporary sort of but there's contemporary gender politics at play, I think at different times in novel too, which I think you handled pretty well. So yeah, I'm curious, like, did you ever think you were going to write this first person from her point of view or keep it a third person? Maybe just talk a little bit about, what it was like writing from Abigail's point of view.
Again, it's sort of, before I ever write anything down, what I do is I spend an enormous amount of time thinking about the book. And I don't outline, write anything down because I don't want to commit to it yet. And I like to see if it stays in my head. I figure if I drift off and I stop thinking about it, maybe it wasn't a story worth telling. And I always knew, but I knew as I was thinking about it that Abigail, she's the protagonist. And again, because this is a linear thriller, and I hope I'm not giving too much away, a lot of my characters in the past have been those characters that have, turn out to maybe be the villains. The protagonists turn out to have darker sides. This is a protagonist in peril. Not that she doesn't have a dark side. I mean, she has this fling on her bachelorette weekend, which might put her in somewhat villain category. But it's more like a mistake that she makes. But we're very much on her side, if nothing more, because we're learning the story through her. And in terms of, writing through her perspective, I thought a lot about a specific quote, and this has to do with the gender issues in the book. And again, we're in spoiler territory, but there is as much in this book to do with, I'd say, toxic masculinity, but also fragile male egos. Mm-hmm. So I had a quote that was sort of a linchpin for me during the writing process whenever I was thinking about how to write these characters from both perspectives. I was thinking, so it's Margaret Atwood wrote the quote, and I didn't use it in the book, although I mention it in the acknowledgements. It's an odd quote because I'm not sure she said exactly these words, but it's attributed to her, and some people will be familiar, which is, women are afraid that men will laugh at them. I said that wrong. Men are afraid that women will laugh at them. Women are afraid that men will kill them. So I often thought of her sense of danger, and then on the flip side, her husband's sense of being made a fool of, and how that kind of drove the book.
Great, yeah, that's another one of my questions, because
I have
down here the Margaret Atwood quote.
I was doing it. Yeah. You've run out of questions now, haven't you?
Yeah, no, I've got plenty more. Believe you me. So I want to go back to the beginning of the novel and actually go a little bit back to a previous answer. You talked a little bit about the linear nature of the story compared to your previous works. And also, like, this is over a fairly short time span as well, especially once, they get to the resort. I mean, that's not a big spoiler. They're going to a resort at some point on our honeymoon, right? I really appreciate, I appreciate how, like, in the opening, you set this hook to it, but then actually you take, for a short book, quite a bit of time in going through Abigail's, she's sort of forced to talk about her romantic history somewhat, but you get a flavor of her parents. And I was actually really curious about the role of her parents, who own a summer theater was once doing really well, but is now struggling. So again, I'll just sort of like leave it rambly at that. I wanted to ask you, before we talk more about Abigail and Bruce and the main characters, well, I don't know, how did you view the role of Abigail's parents? Because they're never, they're never really on screen during the most, penultimate or, the important parts of the sort of actual plot. But I found them to be a really important touchstone as a reader, anyway.
I'm glad you did, because I did too. And in an earlier draft, as I've said, this book had many drafts. And I worked really hard on fleshing out the character of Abigail. And I think I was hitting walls. And one of the reasons I was hitting walls is because I was writing what I thought of as an every woman. She's sort of in her mid to late 20s. She's had a few relationships. She's in New York. She works at a publishing company, thinks she might want to write a novel. She's kind of she's very ordinary in that sense. And, again, I didn't want to give her the typical like haunted past where something bad has happened to her and she's going to have to relive it. I didn't want to give her some of those tropes. I wanted her to just be coming in blank in a sense. And I think ultimately what happened was when I was writing her, she was coming out a little blank because I was having a tough time finding who she was and what her passions were. And at some point in writing it, and I had built up her character. She's the only child of two parents who have run a regional theater in Western Massachusetts for 20 to 30 years. And they're both kind of creative, bookish types that are separating. And partly one of the reasons they're separating is their theater has failed, which has given Abigail this interesting relationship with creativity and money. She'd seen her parents sort of pursue their dreams and have it kind of bite them financially. But at some point in the writing and trying to get Abigail to come off the page more, I thought, well, Abigail's all about her parents and her love for them, because I think she's really close to them. Again, I wrote a story without a tortured parental past. And that once I saw her as being someone who just left home, who still thought a lot about her parents and had all this love for them, I think her character, I hope, became more alive for me and hopefully for the readers. And actually, I thought when she winds up in sort of dire danger at varying points in this book, I have her sort of think back to her parents and think, how she feels about never seeing them again and how they're gonna, how they'll sort of be alone. She sees them as this unit. So they became more and more important as I wrote the book. I think in an original draft, they're just kind of mentioned in the background, but they become a lot more important.
Excellent. I will, at this point, just remind people at home, or maybe tell them the first time if you weren't paying attention, but you should have been. See that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen? If questions for Peter, you can type in there. I'll probably ask another 15 or 20 minutes worth of questions, and then I definitely want to throw it to the people at home. And there's already one cat question, which I promise we will answer once we are done. Yes, it's real.
We were talking about this a little before, but of course, I get to say anything because none of you are actually hearing my words because you're watching the cat, which is good. It's fine with me. Yeah.
My dog is sequestered upstairs. She would bark at the cat. She's also only the size of the cat, like a 15-pound.
Yes, I know your dog quite well from Instagram. Your dog is fearful of walks.
It's unbelievable. Like I have a dog, like you would think, like when you have a pet, especially a dog, like you assume, oh, when you come home from wherever you go, the dog's gonna be happy to see you. But because of quarantine life, she's been so conditioned by when I come home from work, I take her for a walk. So now she's not excited when I come home. She's full of dread. It plays a little bit to my sadistic side, but at the same time, it's like, come on, you should be happy that I'm home.
Yeah, you should follow Paul on Instagram. I mean, you should follow him for book stuff. But really follow him for the shots of his dog cowering under a blanket saying, please don't make me go on a walk. There's this look of dread. Very cute.
Poor Holly.
Poor
yeah, all right. Speaking of dread, so again, this is going to be sort of a long, rambly question because part of it's an appreciation, and I don't know how much you want to give away, so I'm going to let you do most of the talking. But
okay.
Both, Abigail as a character is a big horror movies fan, especially 70s horror movies, and there are many references to horror movies throughout, or not even just horror movies, but movies in general. Hitchcock, you mentioned R11 gets a mention, Shirley Jackson, etc. For one, I thought that was a nice way to build the character, and especially sort of, I don't know, I think, in the 21st century for writing any novel, it's almost impossible to not reference pop culture in some way because it's so pervasive. So so this is the spoiler part. Like when I was flipping through the book again today, just flipping through, and I, because the movie references were all italicized. When I would hit on some, I was like, oh, damn it. He sort of gave away, not gave away, but like that was a huge clue as what might be happening. And there's a few works in particular, so I won't mention them. So I don't know. I guess all of that is to say, why don't you talk a little bit about the role of movies in terms of how it sort of builds the characters, or maybe, you know, telling the reader that, hey, maybe some of these are red herrings, or some of these are actually like a little bit of hints of where things might be going.
I think there's lots of things. I mean, partly it had to do with me building the character of Abigail and thinking about her dad. Her dad's also kind of a movie buff and bookish, and they sort of share that love. And they actually have a game that the two of them play called What Movie Are We In? Which, they've been playing for years. Like if they're sitting out in a park and they see birds gather in a tree, one of them will turn to the other and say, what movie are we in? And they'll be like, oh, we're in the birds. And of course they think of different movies when they do this. But so it's partly how I thought about Abigail and her relationship to her dad. The other thing I was doing was obviously sowing, some seeds about where this story might be going. Hopefully there's enough movie references that now if someone reads it and they're going to think every movie reference is a giveaway. So, when I mention When Harry Met Sally, they're going to be like, I know how this ends. Right. It ends in a New Year's Eve party that I don't think I mentioned When Harry Met Sally, but I might have. And then there's this other thing that I like to do when I write books, which is, I'm always been inspired by movies, and I'm always inspired by like, what this movie or what this book did in terms of this plot. And, and then I put it in my own book, and I start to worry that someone's going to be reading it and they're going to be like, wow, I can't believe he just totally ripped off Patricia Highsmith's Strangers on a Train there. So then I figure if I mention Patricia Highsmith early on enough in the story, they'll be like, oh, it's like he got there first, and it looks more like an homage than a ripoff. And I think that's to me is the key.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, I think that's something we have in common because, aside obviously from actually being inspired by books as well, so many of the things that I've written are sort of movie inspired. And I mean, do you find yourself when you're working on a book, or let's stay particular to this book, did you find yourself going to revisit these movies as you were working on the book, just for a certain feel, or do you try to avoid, like when you're actually writing the drafts at this point, are you trying to avoid those other things from creeping in, or do you seek out those similar vibes or similar?
Sometimes I'll seek out similar vibes. I mean, sometimes what I'll do is I don't do it particularly for movies, but I'm not shy. I know some thriller writers or horror writers will say, you don't want any influence creeping in. I mean, for me, it's all influence, and it's the influence of years and years of absorbing through reading and movies. So I'm often thinking about stuff I loved, but occasionally I will pick up a book. I'll be like, such and such book did this sort of thing really well. I think I picked up John D. MacDonald's The Green Ripper, which is an old book where the sort of end of that book was kind of what I was looking for in the final act of my book. And I just kind of read to see, what did that author do to sort of set that scene. When I was younger, I was a lot more worried about influence, partly because I think I was so much more influenced. I mean, if I read a Raymond Chandler, book at 21, I'm writing pure Raymond Chandler is all I'm writing. But I feel like I'm old enough and set in my ways enough that stopped happening. So it's nice to be able to dip into things and see like, how was that done? How did they make you scared in that scene? How did that writer do that?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think there's so many different ways to be a writer, and part of like the hard part is, or maybe all of the hard part is finding what works for you. But it's hard for me to imagine someone not starting from a place of influence, of wanting to try what other writers have tried before. And then for me, I feel like it's totally been the same sort of process, where in the beginning it was pretty clear what I was being influenced by, and probably still is, but I'm much less anxious about it now because I feel like I'm in more control of what's happening as opposed to what I was trying with my first, my
Yeah,
first
so
book.
I think we had the exact same experience. So it used to be a lot of anxiety around that, and yeah, that's sort of gone away. I mean, that's a fortunate thing about having, basically established your voice for better or for worse, and written a number of books.
Yeah, let's continue on that. So seventh novel, is that right?
It is
Yes.
published.
Yeah, published, yes. And sort of, I don't know, riffing on the review that Claire read at the beginning, the very nice review from the Wall Street Journal, when they talked about how you're an expert and have a history of subverting expectations. I mean, is that something, now that you're 7 books deep, is that something like you feel like is a thread through the 7 books? Is that something you're cognizant of, or does it make you nervous if you're thinking about the reader expectations? Because I know, like, I try not to, like, but I know plenty of authors do. So I'm curious sort of how you deal with, now that you're sort of in this place where a lot of your readers have already read prior books. And in your own sort of like, you don't want the books to feel the same every time either. So I'm curious with expectations on sort of both sides of the coin, yours and readers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a tightrope. I think I would personally like a little more leeway. Like I would like to try some stuff a little farther out of left field, and but I don't want to go, I don't want to do too much, because it does seem like readers are have expectations of the type of book I want to write. And I'm fine with that. This doesn't bother me. It's, all my ideas tend to fall into this category anyway. It's not like I'm dreaming of writing a rom-com, despite the When Harry Met Sally references I sprinkle throughout my books. But I think for this book, I did change things up a little bit. And again, it's that sort of linear thriller idea, that, it was a little less complex. I think there's so many books now that are happening, and I've been doing it for a long time, which you sort of try and subvert the idea of a female in jeopardy by making the female the person who's bringing jeopardy. I mean, I've done that in books, and this one sort of brings back scarier men, and a woman fighting back. And the other thing that is such that I do think a lot about, which is the whole idea of a twist. I think it's less talked about in your genre, although it's talked about a little bit. But really, in the mystery suspense genre now, it's all about the big twist, to the point where they try and sell, Peter Swanson always delivers a big twist. Well, if you keep saying that, eventually,
Right.
like, I mean, it's not gonna be a big twist. And I do think, I actually believe that there are many mystery thrillers that don't need twists. Like everything now has a twist, and sometimes they have several twists. So like the last 3 chapters are all twists in a box. And I think back to like a thriller like Jaws, which is also a horror novel. I mean, there's no twist in that. Basically, there's a shark. It's eating people at the beach, and this disparate group of people go out to stop it. And there's no reveal as to Brody was the shark all along, or whatever. I mean, it is what it is. They have to stop the shark, and there's value in that type of thriller as well. So sometimes I feel a little handcuffed that I always have to come up with a twist. So I just think of twists as, I don't think of them as twists. I think of them as surprises, and I think you always want to be surprising your reader. So that's okay. So you don't always necessarily have to think of them as big twist.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny, so I'm mainly a horror writer, although like my first 2 crime novels, sort of odd crime novels, are being re-released as we speak, or one was released in January, the next one is being released in April. But yeah, I don't know, like even with horror though, I think it was Hitchcock's idea of what suspense is, right? Didn't he describe it as, a bomb blowing up under a table? That's thrilling. But the bomb
action
that hasn't exploded, that's action, right? The bomb that hasn't exploded, that's under the table, that's suspense.
And that the audience know, like if the audience can see the bomb,
right? If you know it's there, yes. I don't know, and I found, especially in the last couple of horror novels that I've written, that to be very helpful as a way to think about and not necessarily have a twist. Because half the time I'm sort of withholding. I've written quite a few ambiguous supernatural novels where I don't necessarily tell you if the supernatural is actually being engaged in some way.
I'm aware of
So
it.
I feel like in some ways I'm withholding a large twist from the reader for the whole time sometimes.
And as we know, a lot of readers love when you keep it ambiguous at the very end.
Oh yeah. Well, I've managed a career out of it so far. My editor used to playfully call me Mr. Ambiguous Horror.
Yeah.
And now I'm Mr. Sad Horror, which was probably equally unsatisfying to people. All right, let's see. I have a few more questions before I have my lightning round that you have to suffer through. And then we'll go to some audience questions. So you meant in your, these are not spoilers, but like in your acknowledgements in the back, I have never, like a little bit of an aside, there are readers out there who will read the end first. You know who you are. I bet there's a couple of you out there, which I would never do. But I have gone to the acknowledgements before, like, but not the actual end of the book, just to read the acknowledgements. But anyway, I noticed one of my favorite directors was on there. I assume you don't know him personally. Maybe you do. But Ben Wheatley.
Yes.
So it's just a certain set of his films that you were like, hey, I'm an admirer.
Well, particularly the Kill List, or I believe it's just Kill List.
Kill List, yes.
Which is for my money, one of the best horror films of the past 10 years. I will also say, for anyone writing it down now, it's on the dark and violent side. It's not a it's a bit of an unpleasant ride, although it's brilliant. And it informs some of my thinking about this story. And I won't say more than that, but yes, that's so funny. So obviously you read that and then you were like, oh, okay.
Well, I did read the acknowledgements after I read the book, but I have been known in the past to go to the acknowledgements.
I like to sprinkle in the acknowledgements, like names of, writers or film directors that might have had particular influence as well.
Nice. I might start doing that. I'm gonna steal that from you. No, Ben Wheatley is a favorite, and that movie in particular is, it's actually, I don't know, it's one of the few horror crime hybrids I think that really works.
That's what I love about it. It has a sort of a switch from what feels like one type of movie to a very different type of movie. Yes. And it does it very well.
My only other piece of advice for people out there, if you're anything like me, I've seen the movie twice. The second time I watched it with subtitles because the thick British accents are so mumbly. I normally don't have a problem with it, but there's some really low mumbling going on, and the movie totally opened up to me. I mean, I really liked it the first time, but the second time, like things just opened up that I hadn't anticipated because I turned on the subtitles.
Because you turned on the subtitles.
Yeah.
You actually understood the words that,
Yeah, a little bit more. So, like I understood how this sort of like, okay, I can sort of see how this is a weird sort of King Arthur-ish riff that Wheatley has always claimed it was, and I always thought poo-pooed him on that. But after watching it the second time, I was like, okay, I see what he's saying.
Yeah. And it does start off as almost a very mumblecore type of like kitchen sink drama. It actually has several shifts of tone throughout it. So
definitely. So one more question about your book, and then the lightning round, and then we'll go to audience questions. So it sounded like when you were describing Abigail, like her creation was what I would call very organic. It wasn't necessarily someone that you were trying to build her from the ground up, as opposed to starting with, I don't know, another character that you were inspired by or something from real life. I'm curious where her husband, Bruce, if, because this is not a spoiler, but Bruce is a very rich man and, came from Silicon Valley, right? Originally, or he sort of made his money.
Yeah, he's made, I mean, it's all, I don't go into massive details about that, but he's gotten rich off a couple apps, and now he's he runs sort of incubator. I mean, he kind of, he's an angel investor. He funds other startups, but he's definitely Silicon Valley rich and young. And so in some ways experienced in the world, in some ways kind of sheltered.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I happened to be listening to a recent nonfiction audiobook called The Uncanny Valley, which is all about this woman's experience in Silicon Valley from about like 2008 into, the mid 10s, 2010s.
Yeah.
So like instantly, so his character was like sort of recognizable to who she was meeting out there and working with. So I want to ask about Bruce a little bit, but you already answered that. And also Quadi, if I'm saying that correctly, the
resort.
place where the resort, the honeymoon resort, is that like do you invent that out of whole cloth? I know there might be some movie references sprinkled in, but
well, I wanted to I love the idea of an abandoned, it's a resort that's been built up out of an abandoned summer camp. I had a summer camp in mind, which was owned by close family friends called, I'm going to shout it out, Camp Fernwood, which is not an abandoned summer camp. It's still running. But I kind of use that geography. And I love the idea of it being abandoned and then refashioned into this sort of high-end resort for very wealthy tech people. And one of the things that I thought was a cool idea, but also a really great idea for me as a writer, which was that it's a tech resort that techie people go to where you don't have cell phones and you have no cell phone service. Like you're living in the woods and you're actually cut off from all that, even though you have all these other luxuries like sommeliers and, round the clock service. And it's on an island. So you're basically trapped in this paradise or not. And, it kind of, so there's not a place in particular I had in mind. I kind of built it up out of imagining a kind of a cool, creepy place, but also out of, you always want to imagine a place where the cell phones don't work when you're writing a thriller. It's, or not, sometimes you can write a really good thriller using a lot of cell phones. So it goes both ways, but cell phones do sometimes throw in a annoying glitch in your plotting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, and I thought that seemed real to me because actually, again, in that nonfiction book, The Uncanny Valley, she talked about like being forced to go on, work retreats where they were, the cell phones worked, but they had to put them away. They weren't allowed to take them out, kind of thing.
I think it is kind of a thing. It's like about you taking like a mental health vacation away from technology, and that they do that. Yeah, some Silicon people do it.
All right, are you ready for the lightning round?
I never knew there was going to be a lightning round. I'm kind of nervous.
Yeah, be nervous, but so we're just looking for a quick auto response. So, whiskey or wine? You can give a little bit of an explanation too, but yeah, whiskey or wine?
Whiskey.
Whiskey. Are you a single malt Scotch guy, or are you more like
malt? Yeah, I like Scotch. I don't mind Irish or bourbon, but yeah, my go-to drink really is single malt Scotch with on its own or with a little water or a little soda. It works all the time.
Yeah, I'm not a wine person. It gives me a headache. I've tried, but I do like single malt Scotch.
I like wine.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to ask. This is gonna be a hard one for you, I think. Vertigo or Rear Window?
That's interesting. I've actually thought of this already, and I'm gonna surprisingly go Rear Window. I do love Vertigo, but I've always been at heart a Rear Window person because it is a piece of pop perfection, perfect suspense, and what I always think is, people think Rear Window is not as deep as Vertigo. Oh, this was lightning round, right? I'm supposed to be short.
That's okay. That's okay.
No, people always think, I think like, oh, Vertigo is the deep one and Rear Window is the one that's not deep. And I actually think Rear Window is incredibly deep. It's about being a voyeur of your own life or getting involved in that life. So to me, they're equally deep, and I take Rear Window for the entertainment value.
Sorry, I'm switching glasses because I can't read my own writing, so I have to go to the actual readers. I can't do bifocals. I can't commit to it.
Really? I've got the progressives.
A year ago, when I figured out I needed readers, I was wearing regular glasses with readers over them because I couldn't go out.
Yeah, that's not.
I couldn't go out and get readers. Anyway, so this one is because I remember from a previous event talking about sort of one of your leisure activities that you like to do. But I'm going to ask you, where is the best place for you to work out your book problems? When I say book problems, like you're thinking about a story, you're trying to work something out. Is it a hike in the woods or in the shower?
Oh, hike in the woods for sure. Definitely walking is like shut my brain off activity. So yeah.
For me, it's weirdly like the shower, the
Okay.
bathroom.
That's
Yeah,
what
I don't know if it's like water in the air. It's also it's sort of weird, like how you subconsciously train yourself, like your own brain trains itself.
It's
Because
like a
so
white
many,
noise. It's like,
yeah.
white noise and then you're enveloped. So.
But I think it's so many times, like I've had good ideas in the shower that like when there's an expectation now that when I
You'll
get
just
there, I'm like, oh
go
yeah,
take a
this is where I'm
shower.
going to solve a problem, and it almost invariably does. It's weird. I do like going for hikes though. As a local, I go to Borderlands State Park quite frequently.
Yeah.
I've set a couple novels in Borderlands as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and you walk near Walden Pond, is that
In
true?
the summertime, I walk in Walden a
Okay.
lot. I mean, I walk everywhere within my range around the
Uh-huh.
Boston area. But in summer, I particularly like to walk in Walden just because I like to be able to take a swim afterwards. But I did plot a book once while walking around Walden Pond.
All right. All right, so these ones will be designed to go quick. No more divergence. What was harder to write, book 2 or book 7?
Book 7.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about that, so I don't think we need to elaborate. That's interesting. For me, book 2 was like the hardest. At least I try to tell myself that. Favorite 70s horror movie. So you don't have a choice. You have to come up with a favorite horror movie from the 70s.
I mean, Rosemary's Baby is 68, right?
Yes, that was 60s. It gets lumped into the 70s.
It's hard. Don't look now.
Nice. All right, 2 more. Haunting of Hill House or We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Of course, both novels by Shirley Jackson.
Haunting of Hill House.
Oh, okay. So because Castle gets a mention in the book. That's a tough one for me. I love both of those books. All right, last question. What's the best murder weapon in the board game Clue?
Oh, I guess I would say candlestick. The rope always struck me as weird because it's so much work. What are you gonna string them up?
Is there a wrench too? Like who's got a wrench? Or am I mixing games?
I don't know if there's a wrench. Candlestick, rope, gun, knife. Candlestick.
Candlestick. Good answer. All right, we're gonna go to audience questions, and we have a bunch. So as I promised, the cat question. Hi from London. Random question. I see your cat in the background. Will a cat appear in the book?
A cat has. Will a cat appear in the book? Yes, there is. There is the mention of a cat. There is. Yeah, there's a mention of cat in all my books, and in some books, cats play much more significant roles.
This question is from Jim, who I think might know you or know your cat anyway. He says, "Is Finty sleeping?"
Well, yes. Yeah, she's she's doing a cat sleep, which is ignoring. But yeah, no, she's sleeping. See that? That's an annoyed cat face right there because I just woke her up. She was sleeping. She likes to be above me, and I say that in all sense, like above me while I'm hanging out on this couch. This is where I do a lot of my writing, and she likes to look down on me. And again, I say that in both ways, right?
Isn't that what all cats do?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the purpose of cats, for them to look down upon their humans. Have you been approached to turn one of your books into film? And if so, which book would you choose?
Yeah. I have been approached, or by approached, I mean other people have optioned a few of some of my titles, not all of them. It's always very exciting when it happens, and you often have a chat with a producer, and it seems like it's very likely to happen, and then you don't hear anything. And if it happens, it would be great. I think of all my books, I think The Kind Worth Killing would make actually a really good shorter series, because I think there's enough going on in that I can see like where certain things would happen at the end of each episode. Feels like it's kind of made for episodic television. So I think that would be exciting. It's under option, and I haven't heard anything, and I just assume either something's happening they're not telling me, or nothing's happening, which is probably the correct thing.
Yeah. Friend and really good writer Chuck Wendig described the difference between publishing. I don't know if he was the originator of this, but I'm attributing it to him. He described publishing as it's no, 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 no until it's yes. And in Hollywood, it's yes, 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 yes until it's no.
So yeah,
Um,
I think I've heard that, and I think it's actually true. There's a level of enthusiasm. There's something very grounded in the publishing industry that when you talk to your editors and your your agent and all that, everyone's kind of like, it's the book industry. Like, hopefully it does well, but we don't know what's going to happen. And you talk to people in the movie industry, and they're like, yeah, they're so enthusiastic. We're going to make this. I have my phone. That's my phone. Annoyingly.
That's Hollywood telling you to stop talking.
Yeah. I've learned a lesson on this, which is don't bring my phone into the into a room for a live event, because also people are like, it keeps buzzing every time. I know friends are texting about me, like probably saying, like laughing at me or something, and I can feel it buzzing and texting. So anyway, so Hollywood, they're very enthusiastic, and then who knows.
Yeah, if I give a brief, I don't know, I find this a funny story. I have a few books that have been optioned, and one that's been under option since 2015. It's such a frustrating, long process that hopefully it works out. And most of the people I've
I think
worked
you're coming
with,
close on one of them, aren't you?
Yeah, but I mean, it's been like that for a while. Like, I mean, if not for COVID, I think it would have filmed last summer. Obviously, there are bigger problems in the world than that movie not getting made. So, we'll see. I'll believe it when it happens. And I will say, by and large, most people that I've talked to are human, because this story I'm going to tell, this person clearly is not human. It's been, fun talking to people about the what ifs. But anyway, really quickly, I had this book, Cabin at the End of the World, and I took a call from a producer at a huge studio. So right off the bat, I was like, why does this guy want to talk? Because Cabin at the End of the World is like a play in a cabin. Like, you don't need a big, amount of money to make it. So I get on the phone, and I'm not exaggerating, in like a surfer dude voice. He was like, hey, dude, I want to be in the Paul Tremblay business.
Yeah.
He kept on going on. It's like, well, I haven't read the whole thing yet. And all he was sent was 50 pages in the summary. But then he says, I know where it's going.
Write that. If you were writing a scene with a Hollywood producer,
they wouldn't believe. Yeah.
You would never put those words in someone's mouth, because it would look so cliche. But
yeah. The call ended with him saying, I haven't read everything yet, but I know where it's going. Time travel, right? I'm like, no, there's no time travel.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. Anyway.
I get it. The Paul Tremblay business.
He is not in the Paul Tremblay business.
I'm gonna get in that.
You're gonna get it. You can buy some stock. You can buy some non-fungible tokens of Paul Tremblay. How's that? Is there a psychological tension similar to In Her Every Fear, in the new book, I presume? I've read all your books, and that is still my favorite. You keep me turning pages. Really enjoy your writing. So
there's a similarity to Her Every Fear, in the sense that there's a it's a sort of a woman in peril, or a person in peril story, where the danger seems to be coming from many different angles. So yeah, I do think there is something similar going on in those two books.
All right, your discussion of the twist and its role in your books is so fascinating. As you write your novels, do you try to envision the twist early on in the process, or do you let the twist develop organically while you progress?
Yeah, I mean, it happens different ways. As someone who doesn't outline, who basically makes it up as I go along, that doesn't mean I don't know what's the undercurrents are that are happening in the story. And actually, what's really important to know, I think, is what the bad guy, or the evil person, or whoever's driving that side of the story, like, you kind of have to know what they're up to, because they are the drivers of narrative in thrillers. Not always, but up to a certain point usually. So I don't do a thing where, like, I have no idea who the killer is at the very end, and I'm just gonna see what happens. I usually know. So sometimes your twist is really a matter of a piece of information that you have already, that you're making a decision about when to reveal it. So that might be your twist. And then sometimes, and a couple times this has happened, I'm sort of 3/4 of the way through a book, or half through a book, and I just, like, something, I suddenly look at the book in a different way. Sometimes I, like, wake up and I think of the book in a different way, and I think, oh, what if that were actually happening? and then you sort of replay it in your mind and you come up with something that's good. And those are the twists that are the best, because of the twists that, you know, maybe surprised you a little, that didn't come from the part of your brain that was trying to come up with a clever part of the book, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you ever wrestle with like, are people going to believe that this twist in particular, or is this like one of the questions you ask yourself? Will people believe this is like a real twist and not have it be so fantastical, not fantastical in a fantasy kind of way, but you know what I mean? Like have it seem, I guess, unreal, so unreal that it might drop them out of the story. Is that ever a concern or?
Yeah, I mean, I think about that sort of ideas of plausibility and yeah, wanting to keep people in the story, which is, you know, one of the reasons I don't outline. I mean, I sometimes think that like if you outline the story, and you know exactly what's going to happen to your character here, there, and there, and there, by the time you've written it, the character will have changed, and maybe it's something they wouldn't have done. So, and then suddenly, you know, I know that feeling as a reader where you're like, it's usually not the twist so much as the character that you're following does something that doesn't make sense for them. That's what pulls me out of stories more than that. I'm not a huge plausibility guy. Like, I mean, everything, my books are basically implausible in many ways. I mean, these are not how murders occur in the world. I mean, murders are messy, horrible things that, you know, they're not people in bars with martinis plotting to kill their wives. That's, you know, there's got to be some of that, but in general there isn't. So I don't worry too much about that. But I do want to keep my characters consistent. I think that's the most important thing. Just that your characters are acting in the way that you've come to expect them to act as the stories progressed.
All right, we got a handful more. So in every Vow You Break, the quote unquote end of the world geography seems to draw the worst out of people. So you talked a little bit about that particular setting, but how do you choose a setting in this book versus your prior novels? Did any of that feel different in a way to previous books?
The locations?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think for this setting is I always wanted to do a vacation book or a honeymoon book. You know, I think there's a little subgenre of that around people going on a trip that sort of suddenly turns ugly or scary, because I like to take people out of their element. So I wanted to do a and then I thought, oh, I'll do an island that's harder to escape from, but I won't do the traditional honeymoon island. I won't do the Caribbean. I'll do Maine, and I'll have it be this sort of this abandoned camp that's been retrofitted. So as soon as I came up with that or started to think about it, it just felt right, and then it stays there in my mind. But in terms of locale, I mean, I set most of my books in the general New England area, which is, I guess, partly laziness in the sense that I know the area and don't need to research it, and also partly that I feel, maybe you feel the same way, that like I live in a great part of the world that fits the books I write. I think I live in a good thriller-esque part of the world.
No, absolutely. And I would cop to both lazy with setting, but also like, especially if it's a horror novel. I mean, there's just so many things to play with just in the history of sort of the Gothic history of New England and the expectations readers have for, a New England horror novel. It's fun to play with.
Definitely.
How do you get into the headspace of a killer or someone who commits questionably ethical acts? Referring especially to other novels of yours like Her Every Fear and The Kind Worth Killing.
I mean, it's all an act of imagination. So, to me, it's just another sort of logical step from imagining myself as a 28-year-old Abigail wanting, I'm just imagining what she might feel. And and if I'm in the mind of a sociopathic killer, I just look for whatever murk is in me that would say, wouldn't it be nice to have no boundaries, to have no feeling? And it's just imagining it. I don't do necessarily a lot of research, but I just sort of throw away typical morality. And the other thing I always just think about what they were like as kids or what they're, I always think about my characters' backstories and what made them this way. And I think it just helps me sort of imagine what they might do in that situation. I'm not sure that was a great answer because I think it's a little bit of a mysterious process that I don't exactly know how to articulate, but that's as close as I can get.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a good answer. And I think, it gets to this weird point that it's hard to describe, and some of it comes from feel, just from having written it, but you get to a point where the character, you hope sort of becomes its own like autonomous thing where you can present the character with questions or scenarios, and based on the choices that they've already made, it's going to start pointing them, where they need to go.
Yeah.
I think anyway. All right, a few more. You said that you typically write a book a year. Do you have a time period of the year that you write your best work?
I mean, I think fall has always been a productive time for me. I mean, summer is just, I write okay. And I've done plenty of writing in summer, but summer often feels like you want to maybe be doing other things. And there's something about, going through schooling, fall always represented, you're kind of buckling down. The days are getting shorter. It's getting cooler out and you're going back to school. That's my,
you're depressing me already.
Yeah, see, but for me, there was always like, oh yeah, I'm going to buckle down now and write. So, fall's a good time to write for me, but I don't have the luxury of saying I'm going to not write this summer and just, finish it in the fall. So I write whenever, but I'd say fall is a good time.
I was going to follow up because I forgot to ask this. I had written it down, but with sort of the semi-obligatory, how difficult was it writing during a pandemic year, or did you find weirdly that it helped you focus because you couldn't really leave? I don't know. What was writing in the past year for you like?
Pretty good. I had both experiences. So I had an early burst of writing where I was just like, got a lot done. And then I totally went, and I was sort of like, hearing author friends be like, oh, I can't concentrate. And I was like, I'm not having that problem. And then I think late summer into fall, I think it's just news, the election, continued COVID news, what was going on with Black Lives Matters. And there was just, I guess the term is doom scrolling. I just found myself constantly, checking through news. And how do you get up and read all that stuff and then get yourself back into the headspace of your book? So I did go through a period of really not being able to concentrate, not only on writing, but reading as well. I found it hard. I sort of had to battle my way out of that by just forcing myself to not check the news all the time, which, we shouldn't be really doing anyway. We don't need to know the news every hour.
Yeah, no, similar experience to me, definitely like a roller coaster. And frankly, if I didn't have a book contractually due May 1st, in a month, I don't know how much writing I would have done. And it was hard for me to read at first, but actually what helped break that dam was rereading a favorite, Peter Straub's The Throat, which is not a comforting book, but it's just so well written. And, just reminded me that, to get back a piece of myself, I have to read. I don't read to escape. I read to be who I am. That was something that I sort of realized, partway through.
Rereading as well. And I think rereading is a great thing to do because you don't have to work your way into the narrative. You're just there as soon as you open it up. And why not give yourself that escape with all this other stuff going on? So.
All right, let's try to get through some of these a little bit quicker because we're, at an hour, but, we don't want to keep people too long.
Quick,
but
lightning round and then.
Yeah, well, this one's sort of a lightning round question. Will a poker game appear in this book or another that you'll write?
Yes, one day it will appear. I know exactly what that means.
Okay.
I promise. It'll be a murderous situation.
I guess a tiny quick question for me. Can I ask Paul a question? Have you been teaching virtually or in person? So I teach at a small private school just outside of Boston. So I've been mainly in person since September. In the spring last year, we were all virtual. But in September, we went back, mainly because, again, it's a small school. We had the 3 feet distance the whole time. I do think the school did a good job with the safety protocols of, fundamentally changing the school, how like people pass through classes, even like the lunch periods. Usually it's just 3 big lunch periods and everyone gathers, but they found 5 different locations, one for each class. So the freshmen are always with the freshmen, the 10th graders with the 10th graders, as a way to, to help, with the ease of contact tracing, et cetera. So it has been a strange, stressful year. I mean, I can't lie about it that that there were worries, and, I've had, the school gave us COVID tests January through February, which is good, once a week. But yeah, I mean, I would prefer not to have to ever do that again. I did get my first shot of Moderna a week ago, so it does feel like the end of the tunnel is approaching. Let's see, I'm going to have you just maybe answer this last part of it, mainly because I'm not going to be able to parse that giant acronym. This question was, I guess it's a little bit about your writing life prior to publishing, I guess, one of your big successful novels, one of the many. But how do you look back on that time when you were publishing short stories, but no novel yet? Any chance for a short story collection?
I would love to put out a short story collection. I used to write sort of creepy little thriller short story collections, and Paul's been very lucky to have you had 2 out? 2.
One with Morrow. I had a couple with smaller presses before.
Yeah. I don't feel like I'm hearing much clamoring for that short story collection. I mean, I think there are tough sells out there. It's a goal I would like to have one day. I liked writing stories. The truth is, I like writing novels more. Like, I really like being immersed in that long story. So I occasionally write a short story still. I usually write one in between novels, but I do prefer novel writing for the whole.
Well, just tell your editor at Morrow. It's like, hey, Paul Tremblay at Morrow has a short story collection. How come I can't?
Why can't I?
Yeah, there you go. Have you ever thought of a premise where a murder picks its victim by randomly attending online book events? It's either someone you know or your cat wrote that.
Yes.
Can you share any? Oh, that's a good question. I was going to ask about that too. Can you share any literary references, influences, and/or favorite novels? I mean, I'm sure there's a million, because obviously, I mean, all the movies you like, and you have a movie poster in the back.
There's a lot, yeah. I mean, Patricia Highsmith is a big influence. One maybe I haven't talked about as much is Ruth Rundell, who is a mystery writer. She's passed away, but she wrote kind of split between whodunits and psychological thrillers, and she's just someone I pretty much love all of her books, and she's really amazing and really dark writer. So I love her, and as usual, when I get these questions, my mind goes blank.
Sure.
Which, if you catch me at a different time, I'll never stop talking about all the people I love to read. But yes, but those are 2 right off the top of my head.
Good answers. I'd say one of my contemporary favorites. I mean, there are so many, but Megan Abbott is a favorite. And actually, I'll put in a plug for a book that came out last summer by S.A. Cosby called Blacktop Wasteland. Was his first novel, and it was amazing.
I heard it was good.
Okay, 2 more. Peter, do you have any recommendations of thrillers to watch on Netflix?
On Netflix. I think I'm not sure, but I'm not sure it's on Netflix. But
it doesn't have to be Netflix. How about a rec for a movie? Yeah.
I love, and not everyone's heard of it, but Happy Valley, which is a police procedural out of North England, is really. I think there's 2 series. Brilliant stuff. And I also like another British series called Unforgotten. Is very good, that I've been watching recently.
I would throw out mainly for you a recommendation if you haven't seen a movie called The Wolf of Snow Hollow.
I did see that this year.
Oh, you did see it? Okay, yeah.
I was wondering if you'd seen that one.
Yes.
That was a good horror movie this year, and I'm enjoying it.
It's like a weird mix of like a crime a little bit, like there's tonally, it was like there was no movie. It's such a strange movie. Totally.
It was a very strange movie. And I'm enjoying right now. I'm in the midst of Servant on Apple TV. Have you watched that?
Oh, you don't have Apple. Well, I haven't signed up for Apple TV yet, I should say.
It took forever for us to figure out. I mean, how to. It's all very confusing, the streaming services. Yeah. But The Servant, which is produced by M. Night Shyamalan, is pretty good, creepy stuff.
Nice. All right, I think this is an important one. Do you want to wish your mom and aunt a HB? I assume that's happy birthday.
Yes, a big happy birthday to my mom on Thursday, and of course her twin sister, my Aunt Sue, and down in Pennsylvania on Thursday.
Oh, did they ever play tricks on you, or are they like identical twins? Did they ever try?
Yeah, they're identical twins, and they used to play tricks on people. I think there's a story, and I never got the full story, but like, they were in the 1950s. They were on sort of a double date, and they switched with their dates to see if they could tell.
This has to be your next novel. I mean, that's
the
start
there's
right
some
there.
sort of dark twin thing, but it's funny when you're the child of an identical twin. To me, I realize they are very identical and look alike, but to me they're quite different.
Right.
Different personalities. They just, I don't think I was ever confused. Right now, my aunt probably like, yeah, you used to call me mom all the time when you were like 4. So who knows?
Well, that's great. That's good to know. Maybe I'll write the book about the crime writer with identical twins.
We'll have proof. We'll have proof that you stole the idea. So
Yes.
right here.
All right. So I don't know. I think if Claire is coming back, there she is.
I think we're hit the
Thank
end
you
of the rest
guys
of the-
so much for an amazing event, and just some great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure our audience did too. And thank you everyone out there for spending your evening with us. You can learn more about and purchase Peter's book at harvard.com or via the chat link. And on behalf of Harvard Bookstore in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I hope you all have a great night. Keep reading, be well, and wear your mask. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks.
Thank you all.